Welcome to the Gutsy Podcast, the show where you learn how to own what you actually want and shift the mind junk that's been holding you back. I'm LauraAura, keynote speaker, coach, and your guide to help you get clarity, build confidence, and make the gutsy moves that change your life. Each week, I'm going to help you simplify things by teaching you how to get out of your head while stepping into action. This way you can achieve all those life shifts that you've been overthinking. Your desire? That drives you. But gutsy? That's what gets it done. Have you ever wondered how to tap into your inner guidance system and truly master the power of your mind? In today's episode of the Gutsy Podcast, we're diving into the transformative world of intuition, mindset, and spiritual alignment with the incredible, absolutely incredible Reverend Rose Hope. Whether you're navigating challenges or looking for clarity in your next big move, this conversation is packed with insights to help you create your own version of heaven on earth. Reverend Rose Hope is a thought leader in spiritual and business development, dedicated to elevating how we think and live. After overcoming chronic illness and not one, but two near-death experiences, she spent the last 20 years guiding others to master their minds and use their intuition. She holds a bachelor's in metaphysics and health management, is the founder of Rose Hope Incorporated, and has spoken at Harvard as well as appeared on ABC, NBC, and more. She's also the host of When Spirit Calls podcast, an international best-selling author, and a mom of two. Rose is here to share her wisdom and help you align your goals with your intuition to unlock your next level of success. And since we're talking about intuition today, inside the Gutsy Collective, I have a self-paced audio lesson to help you learn how to strengthen your intuition and trust yourself. And the convenient part about joining the Gutsy Collective is that you get to learn at your own pace, and you are backed with a community where there's accountability, support, a place to ask questions, and every month we get together live for a live coaching session as a group. So if you're on a personal development journey and you're looking to also strengthen your intuition, then go to LauraAura.com and sign up to start your 2-week absolute free all access pass. On a personal note, I adore Rose Hope. I have hired her several times to read my Akashic records. And when I tell you that this beautiful soul is the real deal, she will blow your mind in the best of ways. So let's get into it. Reverend Rose Hope, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be with you, Laura.
Oh my gosh, the feeling is so mutual. So quick backstory for everybody listening. I have had the absolute honor of having Rose Hope read my Akashic records, to do energy work with me, to release old ties from lifetimes and lifetimes ago. And we just have this magic between us. And so every time we have an opportunity to do anything together, it's an immediate hell yes. So I'm just thrilled to share this space with you today.
I am too. It is magic. We come together and I can feel the energy playing with us. It's so good.
Yes, it sure is. I'm fascinated with your work and what you do to help support people. And I think that today's conversation is just going to be really enlightening for people, but I'd love for them to get to know you a little bit more first. So talk to me about, I know you've had quite a journey. I was freshening up and reading up on I read your full story on your website. So give me the backstory. What's led you to where we are here today?
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm going to start with my first near death when I was 5, because that to me is where my world opened up the most. So I was eating one of those round jawbreaker candies. Do you remember those candies?
I do.
I was walking around my house with one of these big things in my mouth. My dad said, Deanne, go sit down before you choke. And so I turned to go sit down and I took a breath. And sure enough, I choked. And so my dad came, he wrapped his arms around me, started doing the Heimlich. Nothing was budging. I remember thinking in my 5-year-old brain, my head's going to pop off. I thought that was it. This was it. And my dad couldn't get that out. So I went limp in his arms. And when that happened, I started hovering above my dad. I remember just floating above my dad. I remember exactly where I was on the floor in the kitchen in our old house. And my mom ran to the phone to call for help. My sister looked around the corner to see what the commotion was. And my dad did something actually you're not supposed to do. And I'm so glad he broke the rules, because I wouldn't probably be here today. But he took his thumb and he pushed against the side of my throat and was able to just get in there enough that he could get that jawbreaker out. And he got me
Wow.
breathing again. And so interesting, all the little blood vessels in my face had burst. That's how much pressure I experienced. So my whole face was like black and blue, like like a hickey,
Yeah.
but on my face. And so it took a couple weeks for that to subside. But what I really noticed after that, or at least what my parents also noticed, was that I started to become a very lucid dreamer. I started to have really intense dreams. In fact, my dreams were very traumatic. They were scary. There was beasts and demons, and they were very dark, to the point where I would like have sleep paralysis. Like it was terrifying for me. And so I also would start to have these premonitions. So like I would wake up and I'd be like, "Hey mom, so and so's mom died last night." And my mom's like jaw would hit the floor because she would be like, "How do you know this?" And then the phone would ring and someone would be like, "Oh yeah, so and so died," like. So I was raised in this beautiful Catholic home. My parents were both loving, beautiful. I was so blessed. I'm so blessed to have them as my parents. But I don't think my mom knew what to do with me. Do you know what I mean? Like she would just say, "Okay, we'll pray," So I did a lot of prayer, which thank God I had that as in my arsenal of tools. But other than that, I just kind of felt, really out of place. And I thought, okay, well, God gave me a second chance at life. I better prove to God that I am worth saving. And
Mm.
so by grade 4, I was like running the Kids for Saving Earth Club, and I was, student council in high school. I was this overachiever, was Snow Queen of Fort Saskatchewan in 1998, like all these things, because I was trying to prove my worth. So I spent my life getting caught up in that, thinking I've got to show that God did the right thing by choosing me to stay. And that left me really struggling. But because of that experience, I went into EMS and firefighting. So that was my first career. I became a medic and worked on ambulance. And then lo and behold, I start getting these like spirits coming home with me.
Wow.
Oftentimes we'd have to spend time with deceased and their families, there was a process for that. And oh my gosh, I remember just the one in particular was an old woman, and I had to help the RCMP to take pictures and stuff. And so I'm moving her body, and I'm, having to deal with this body, and I could just feel her presence. And like she came home with me. I think I had 3 or 4 showers. I was just so creeped out because I didn't know what was happening to me. I was like, I'm losing my mind. I think I must have PTSD.
Yep.
I'm losing my mind. And so I ended up leaving that profession because one, because I thought I was losing my mind, and two, because I had a long-standing knee injury that really restricted my ability for firefighting and for lifting patients and things like that. So I knew my longevity in that career wasn't going to be there. So I went back to school in the medical profession, and in that process, lo and behold, I have another near-death experience.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
So with this one, it was very different. Like some might even call this more of like a spiritually enlightened experience, but I was recovering actually from the knee surgery that I had had. And I was at home, and my brother-in-law was tending to me. He lived with me at the time. And I went completely unresponsive. Like I completely blacked out. I was on crutches, but trying to hobble from the kitchen to the living room. And all of a sudden, like everything went dark, and I don't remember like the fall or anything. But when I did come to, or what I thought I came to, I was surrounded by these incredible orbs of light. Like I was no longer in my house anymore. I was in this heavenly place. And these beautiful orbs of light were just like so brilliant, like colors, Laura, that you have never seen in this world. Like it was so breathtaking and it was so euphoric. And I remember saying, I'm staying here. This is the best ever. And although they didn't use words, I understood them as well. And they said, "No, you still have work to do," as in many near deaths. "No, you're not done yet." And so I came to. So I'd had this angelic experience, but like now I'm really losing my mind, right? Now I'm really thinking I'm going crazy. And I came to with my brother-in-law, tending to me, and he was like, "Oh my God, I was so scared. Like, thank God you're back. Like, let me help you." Kind of got settled. And I didn't tell him right away because I didn't know how to explain to him. Like, I think I just went to heaven. Like, I think I just saw angels. Like, I just talked to angels, right? Like, he's gonna think I'm nuts. So in the days to follow, this experience is not leaving me. Like it is like so thick within me, and I need to start telling people. So a girlfriend had come over for a visit, and I'm explaining to her this experience. She's safe, right? I'm like, she's not going to judge me. I'm going to tell her about this angelic experience and see what happens. So I'm telling her about these angels, and I'm going on and on. And my brother-in-law, because he lived with me at the time, was eavesdropping. And I'm so glad he was, because he came running into the kitchen, slammed his hand on the counter, and he said, I knew it. I felt the angels too.
Oh, wow.
And I
Ooh,
get goosebumps every time I
chills.
say that. Yes, every time, because it was that validation. And so his experience was, I went unresponsive. I fainted. He caught me, thankfully, because I would have smashed my head on the tile floor. He caught me, guided me to the floor. He was starting to panic, about to call 911 because he couldn't tell if I was breathing or whatever. And he was like, oh my God, like what's going on with this? Couldn't find a pulse, right? Like it was almost like time stopped for me. Like I had just shut down. And he said, as soon as he went to like go get the phone or whatever, he felt these energies come into the house, and he could only explain them as angels. And they said to him, he heard clearly in his mind, she's going to be okay. Just take a deep breath. And he took a deep breath, came back to me, and within a few seconds, I opened my eyes with a smile on my face.
Wow.
So he also had this very spiritual experience, right? But yet, if we don't speak about this stuff, we don't know, right? Like had I kept my mouth shut about that, then he wouldn't have had his experience validated either. And so that was such a huge message for me, because I thought, oh my gosh, I need to start sharing this. I don't care if people think I'm crazy anymore. I spent my whole life staying hidden. It was better, it was safer for me to be hidden and to not be seen in that way. Right? I was doing everything I could to fit inside the box of what was normal and what was successful and all of that. And I fought in that space so much because I felt so out of place there. And so I thought, this is it. Like, I've got to start leaning in. So I started doing a lot of healing work. I took a course on the Akashic Records and discovered this whole other world that I didn't know was possible. And for those that are listening and don't know what those are that's your soul's library. So the Akashic Records is a very sacred, intuitive space where we go and we get information from God's library or your soul's library. Everything that is, was, and ever shall be can be found in the Akashic Records. It's such a potent, beautiful space. So I learned about this space, and yet I still was fitting in the mold, right? So I had this, it's almost like I had two sides to me. I had this very spiritual, connected, intuitive side, and I had this very like logical, must do things in order kind of side. And I struggled because in the real world, I felt so much guilt and shame because I should have been happy, because I had everything that anyone would want. I had a nice home. I had the $1 million family. I had a boy and a girl. I had everything that anyone would ever desire. And yet I was so unhappy there. And I fought that battle for a while of feeling that guilt and shame, thinking, come on, I should be happy. Why am I not happy? What's wrong with me? All of those questions. And so it took me actually to the birth of my second child. And shortly after that, about 6 months after my son was born, I didn't realize I had postpartum. And I really went into this deep depression. And I thought, this isn't the way that the world is supposed to be. Like, I felt so lost in that space between what I thought I was supposed to be doing and what the conditioning was of my of being human and being successful versus this very spiritual being, right? And so I prayed about it. I said, okay, God, I'm ready to check out. Like, I was so done. I was in such deep despair, and I know it's hard for me to even imagine now, like how could I ever want to leave my children or whatever, but I felt like I was in such a dark place. It was like it would be better for everyone if I wasn't there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I
I
went
do.
there. Yeah. And so in that moment, pleading for mercy and praying for help, the most beautiful thing happened. And I had this angelic presence come in and tell me, this is what you're going to do. Like, I got this full download, like, here's the path. And boy, oh boy, did I listen to that. I stepped into that. It took me down this beautiful spiritual journey. I understood that I didn't need to achieve or do something in order to have meaning in my life, in order to be worthy. And I also learned that in order for me to find heaven again, because my whole life I wanted to go back to those heavenly places, right? Like that was such a battle for me. And in order to find my heaven, I needed to see it within myself. I needed to uncover this understanding that heaven is innate within us. It already exists within us. It's in there. Our work is to clear all the muck away and all the limited beliefs and all the traumas and all the whatever to see that the heaven is there. We cannot access heaven from the outside in. It doesn't work that way. We've got to access it from within us. And that was one of the most profound lessons that I learned going through that process is like, oh, wait a second. I've got to fill my soul bank. I've got to create this relationship with myself, within myself. And that is how I start to build heaven. I start to see that heaven is there and present. And as a result of that, I get to witness heaven outside of myself every day, almost every minute, minus a few of my very human things, of ego getting in the way and, and having real life struggles. But for the most part, I get to see these glimpses of heaven every day. And it's so beautiful. And I just want for others to be able to witness the same.
Wow. 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 Listen, every time you were talking about your story when you were coming back,
Yeah.
like the hair on my neck just stood. Like the goosebumps are so real. And
Whew.
I want to go back to something that you said about if we don't talk about it, then we don't get to learn more about our own experiences and validate even others around us. And I think that that's something that, especially if you're listening to this episode, I'm going to guess that you probably have some abilities or intuitive nudges, or maybe you're kind of curious or you're dabbling, or maybe you're a super expert, and all are welcome. But I'm going to guess that there's also a part, it's like, how much do I talk about this? Right? How much do I let this part of me out? Is it just this silent version of me? Because much like you, I spent, I've been tapped in since I was a little girl. I can remember some of my earliest interchanges with spirit and energies. And it just felt so weird, awkward, not spoken, right? Like it gets kind of put in this corner, like, oh, there's the weird girl. Like she's talking
Yes.
to ghosts again. And that's the corner I was in anyway. So it just became like, if I just don't talk about it, it gets to be my own special thing.
Right.
And I spent most of my life like that. I built a lot of my first business like that. And
Mm.
when you when you don't allow that stuff to integrate with your everyday life, I just feel like you continuously bump up against the lack of fulfillment and the challenges and
Yeah.
all this stuff. Do you find that in people as well? Like if you don't integrate it, it almost fights you in a way.
In a way, right? I mean, any knowledge that we're not using is worthless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when we have these connections or these abilities and we hide them away, it's like not only are we denying ourselves of our ability to stand in that truth and that true power that we have, but we also deny other people of that because when we speak our truth, when we share the stories that are scary and vulnerable and fear being judged, when we do that, it's not just about that story and who's listening. It's beyond that because what's happening is it's like we're giving permission. It's almost as though we're giving permission for others to speak their truth.
Yes.
And for all those people that were lacking that sense of belonging, once those of us that felt like we didn't belong start saying, yeah, I feel like I didn't belong. I was the black sheep or I was, the weird one or whatever. Once we start speaking that, then we start to realize, holy shit, there's a whole bunch of us. In fact, there's this whole belongingness for the people that didn't feel they belonged,
Yes.
right? And so it changes the game completely for us because we realize that there is a facade or there's a conditioning that's been placed on us that said, here's what's normal, here's what's right, and here's what, successful people look like.
Yes.
But I know a lot of very successful people on the surface who are miserable on the inside. And you can have all the external success you want in the world. It's not going to fix what's going on inside. It's not going to help you to get to heaven. Because again, in order to access it, you could have the fanciest house and a yacht and all the money in the world, but you will still not find heaven there.
Mm.
It's not found there.
So what is missing then? When you're in that space and you're experiencing that, I know it's unique to each story, but what is the thing that's missing that's not allowing that fulfillment and that heaven on earth to actually be fulfilled?
It's a relationship with self and source. It's a relationship with yourself and those multidimensional aspects of yourself. So we have the higher self, which some would I call it the God mind or my divine mind. So that's my higher self. That's Rose Hope. That's my higher self. That's not the ego-based, Deanne. That's the higher self of me. Then you've got the aspect of the ego mind. That's another aspect of ourselves. And here's the interesting thing about the ego is the ego actually has kind of grown like a bit of a tumor in a way. Now, the ego has a place. Don't get me wrong. The ego keeps us alive. It keeps us moving forward in this world. However, over thousands of years, the ego has been left to run the show, and it's become like this tumor that's grown inside of people. And so for the people that have all these successful extrinsic things, oftentimes the ego has driven them to achieve those things, and usually driven them by traumas and other things that are going on. And what happens when we do that, it's like, back to what I said, you've got to fill the soul bank first in order to be able to fully receive and experience the value of the money bank, so to speak. And so for those people that have had great success in those areas but are not happy, it's usually because they don't have this relationship with their ego self, with their higher self, and with who they are in this physical form. And so that's usually the starting point to be like, okay, have you done any inner work? Have you reached into your spirit and your soul to really uncover why you're feeling how you're feeling, where the roots are, where the clearing needs to happen, all of those things. Most people who are miserable but have extrinsic success, you will find that many of them have not done the inner work. Now, then there's the people that have that extrinsic success and they've done the inner work, and those are the people that are truly joyfully happy, right? So there is a small group of those people, but most of the people that I've seen have external success, they come to me and they say, why am I not happy? Why am I sad? Why am I feeling empty? Why am I not fulfilled? I'm doing all these great things. I've got all this money. I could go anywhere I want in the world, right? And the answer lies within us.
Trusting yourself and your intuition can be the reason that you move forward and achieve all of your goals, or the reason that you stay stuck in the same place. Inside the Gutsy Collective, which is my monthly membership for driven women who are ready to do the thing, there is a self-paced audio lesson on trusting yourself. And in audio lessons that range between 10 and 20 minutes, I'm going to teach you first why you don't trust yourself in the first place, some reflection on what has happened in the past when you have trusted yourself. Sometimes it goes really well, and sometimes we go on a learning journey. I give you some very practical ways so that you know how to start trusting yourself more, and teach you some methods so that you know how you're differentiating between thinking about something and knowing and trusting it. And guess what? You can dig into these lessons for free for the first 2 weeks. Just go to LauraAura.com, click on the Gutsy Collective, and sign up and get started right away. It's so true, because if you're forever looking outside of yourself, checking the boxes, climbing the ladders.
That was me.
I was just going to say, much like in your story when you were younger, right? Like doing all the races and showing up in all the right places and doing all the right things. It's like, it's all outside of you.
Yeah.
Where that true, as you describe it, the heaven on earth, that fulfillment, that connection, that actual joy and happiness, that's an inside job.
It is. And here's the thing though, we do so much to resist going into our souls.
Yeah.
We will avoid it like the plague. Like we will push it away, push it away, push it away because people are so afraid of what they'll uncover there.
Mm.
Which once you start to doing the work, you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't so scary. Or sometimes you have a bit more of a dark night of the soul where you're like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. I have so many problems, or I have all this shadow work or whatever that is. But I'm telling you, it is so worth it. It was so worth digging through my trenches and uncovering the things that I had lied to myself about, uncovering the things that, that were buried deep there that I hadn't paid attention to, that I didn't realize. And I mean, it's an ongoing process. I'm not done by any means. It's a constant journey, but it can be a really invigorating, enlightening journey. It doesn't have to be this dark, heavy, awful experience. And I think that's what most people identify with of like, oh no, I'm going to have to go into the throes of hell in order to get to heaven. You don't have to walk the path to hell to get to heaven. That is also not the way to get to heaven, right? We've just got to be willing to look at ourselves and to honor ourselves and to love the crap out of ourselves. And if we can do that, then it's like all of these pieces, all the baggage starts to get unpacked. And you'd be surprised that for some people, how easy it actually can be. It doesn't have to be hard. And for those that it's a little harder for, well, some might argue that, we all experience pain, but the length of the pain or the length of the suffering is our choice. And I think part of this is recognizing that we have way more power within ourselves to choose and to allow ourselves to move through a process with maybe a bit more grace and ease versus making it hard on ourselves. And for those of us making it hard on ourselves, it's probably because we needed to make it hard on ourselves for whatever the reason in learning is, right? And,
Yes.
I can relate to that because I made some things really hard on myself unnecessarily. Right. And
Yes.
it's because I needed to go through that level of suffering. But recognizing now that I have way more choice, I'm in the power seat now.
Well, and I'm a huge advocate for telling people like even stuff like this, yes, it can be challenging, but that's a temporary discomfort.
Hmm.
Not changing anything is a permanent discomfort.
Yes.
And so right there comes back to the word choice. What are you going to choose today?
Yes.
Are you going to choose to go in? Are you going to choose
Yeah.
to go down the paths and unpack things and,
Yeah.
maybe be faced with some challenges and free yourself of that stuff? Or are you going to choose to continue to live this way for the rest of your life? Because
There you go.
that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I can speak to it as well. It's freeing as fuck
Isn't it?
when you do the inner work. Like,
Oh,
listen, I have done some dark night of the souls. Okay. My soul has just always enjoyed, for whatever reason, going down the hard, bumpy, blindfold path. But you know what? I gain so much wisdom and perspective and depth and connection that it got to the point where I'm like, I have to teach other women how to do this. Right. Like
yes.
I have to help other people free themselves from themselves
Yeah.
because once you start to experience what that fulfillment actually feels like, even if it's just a little tiny taste,
Oh,
that's all it takes.
all it takes. And then you're hooked in, right? It's like the game
Yes.
of golf. You get like one really good ball and you're like, oh yeah, I can do this.
I'm a professional golfer.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to me. I just want to add to that because I think that process of going through the dark night of the soul or through some of those difficult journeys where we're doing more of the shadow work to uncover, I think it's important to bring to the surface that it really is about perspective, and just because you're feeling those denser energies doesn't mean that they're bad.
Yeah.
We give guilt and shame and hate and anger like a really bad rap. We give fear a bad rap, but really all of these energies that are coming in for us, they're coming in for us. And they're coming in so that they can be seen and heard as well. They're like children. They just want to be seen and heard just like we do. And so when we say, oh, guilt, I see you. Oh, anger, I see you. what am I learning here? Allowing yourself to leverage that energy rather than looking at it as like, oh, it's so bad, push it away, push it away. Our job here is to leverage that energy, to leverage that experience and reap the reward of it. Because in that anger, in that shame, in that whatever it is you're feeling, there is gold in there. There is
Mm.
gold in there. If you're willing to honor it, you'll find the gold.
I love this whole reframe about just acknowledging and talking to these emotions. That's something
Yes.
that you taught me that I do on a regular basis, even with my body. Like, long time migraine, sufferer, and I fought it so bad, right? Is it perfect right now? No. Am I headed in the right direction now? Yes. So I'm taking that. But a lot of it started to change whenever the migraine would pop up. And instead of being like, here we go again. Here's my
Mm,
stupid head. Here's my body doing this again, and getting like literally getting angry at it. I'm just like, oh, hey, you, I see
mm,
you're back. And
yeah.
literally, this is one of the things that I learned from you. It's like, what are you trying to tell me? What can I do for you today? And
Mhm.
it feels like it should be more complicated, but the way that it subsides it doesn't go from a 2 to a 10. It might go from a 2 to a 4, but
Wow.
it's not dragging me down anymore. And I think the same thing with these like guilt and shame and fear, instead of
Yeah.
being like, oh, I did something terrible and I feel guilty and I have to hide this and plug it away. It's like when you invite that to be part of your story and talk
Yeah.
to it, it just softens it.
It does soften it. We're alchemizers, right? We're alchemizers. And so
Mm.
yet we're so busy at pushing away all these things. It reminds me of this fun little analogy of the cows and the bison. The cows are out in the field eating their grass. They see this storm coming and they're like, oh no, the storm is coming. Let's run from it. And so the cows start running from the storm. Well, eventually the storm catches up to the cows, and now the cows are running with the storm. So what they're doing is prolonging their suffering. The bison, however, they look at that storm and they think, let's head into that storm. And they head into the storm. And because of that, they move through that storm much faster. And so, moral of the story is don't be a cow.
Be a
But
bison.
right, be a bison. But I think this is the game that most of us play where we're like resisting and running from it, right? We're like, oh my God, that headache, I've got it back again. And now I'm mad about it and I'm pushing and I'm pushing. Well, that's just creating more of that energy. And so we have this wonderful opportunity to remind ourselves we do have the power. We are alchemizers, right? We have the ability to shift energy if we're willing to lean in and receive in that process.
Mm. What might that look like? What does that sound like? How would one do that? Because I feel like that could be something like, okay, that's super interesting. How do I
So,
do that when it pops up?
you know, I mean, when anything comes up, anything to the surface, I like to use the technique of holding my hands like I'm holding the grief or I'm holding the anger to alchemize it. And like you said, we talk to it. So I say, "Oh, hi anger, I see you there." And I imagine it like a cute little bird or a bunny or something in my hands, a little more innocent. And as soon as I start talking to it, it already starts to change. But if we want to get more value out of it, okay, what is this about? Where is this from? Why am I feeling this way? Is there another story that, is buried deep within my memory banks that this is contributing to? Like you get to do those reflective pieces. But here's what I really want to get to, because I think at the end of the day, this is actually all about relationship. And it's about the relationship you have with yourself. And yourself is a multidimensional being, not just you, the person, but you as a multidimensional being. And I talked about this earlier. I said that you've got your high mind or your God self, your divine mind, you've got your ego self, and then you've got your physical body. And so you can allow yourself to kind of be the observer of these, right? And so once you start to build relationship, and again, it's just through conversation. And yes, I talk to myself a lot, okay? But it's like, okay, hi, mind. How are you today? I know you're going to guide me through the day, right? Tuning in. A little conversation with that ego mind. So when the ego comes in and it says, You can't do that. Who says you can go on a podcast? Who says you can speak this? Who says you can do this? You say, oh, ego, thank you so much. I know you're trying to keep me safe, but there's something else going on here. And again, dig in a little bit more to that. So we start to build these relationships. Same with the body, hi body. Oh, I feel that pain in my hip today. What's going on about that? What can I do to help you? Again, we're tuning in, we're building these beautiful relationships with these aspects of our being. And as soon as we do that, we already start to alchemize our lives. We already start to shift our perspectives. Something as simple, and this is a quick little tip that I give people who are struggling when they're feeling the overwhelm of the day, or they're worried about money, or they're just struggling in some aspect of their life. And maybe they wake up in the morning and they want to just hide their head under the covers again. You ever have those days?
Absolutely.
You're like, I don't want to face the day. It feels overwhelming to me. I acknowledge that God is waking up with me, because we all have God within us. God is innate within you. You come from source, you come from creator, again, whatever you want to call it. My girlfriend calls it Gus, God, universe, source, Gus,
Gosh,
whatever
love
you
it.
want to call it, right? Isn't that fun? Whatever you want to call it, you say, good morning, divine, good morning, creator. I know you're waking up with me, and I know that you're going to do all the work that needs to get done for the day. Thank you so much. Just that in itself changes the game for me, because God ultimately is the doer. Divine is the doer. Divine is the doer. Divine is the doer. Let that soak in. At first, I was like, no, God is not the doer. I'm doing the thing. I'm speaking. I'm writing the notes. I'm doing the work. But what we mean by that is that divine is actually allowing us and giving us the fuel and the momentum and the words to speak. Divine is doing this for me. I don't have to carry any burden of my day, of my existence, because divine is my doer. And
Mm.
so when I start to get caught in that funk of like, worry about this, worry about that, God is my doer. Okay. Divine is my doer. Okay. I lean into that. And as soon as I allow myself to just lean into that, it's like all of a sudden the day is taking its own course and it's doing its thing. And I've made it through the day. And I'm like, oh my God, that was actually a really great day. Look at that. The other thing I want to share with people is divine is the supplier too. Divine is the supply. Divine is the supply. So divine gives us whatever it is we need, whether it's the experience, whether it's the money, whether it's the clothes on your back. Divine is the supply. And we like to think that like, oh, well, no, my client's giving me the money. Oh, it's divine that's giving you the money. It might be a little more indirect, but it's divine being the supplier for you. And once we start to acknowledge that, then you can start to invoice God. So for anyone struggling financially, invoice God if you haven't been, okay, for all the service and all the work you're doing. Because once we really anchor into that, it's like abundance just starts pouring in, right? So we allow ourselves to come into this space where we recognize that there's so much more energetically beyond what meets the eye that's providing us with everything that we need. I have a quote: in every given moment, you have everything you need and then some. In every given moment, you have everything you need and then some. And if you can trust in that, if you can anchor into that without doubt, doubt will sink the vibrational frequency, right? But if we can trust in that, it's magic. I'm telling you.
Mm. Wow. It's such a good reminder that, in any given moment we can shift everything, right? But it's when the ego gets involved and
Mhm.
is steering the ship.
Yeah,
The work that you're talking about, it takes intention to do that.
it does.
You have to be willing to slow down long enough to do that. And even if it only takes 10 seconds, if you're not used to doing it, you have to be, this is part of that co-creation, that part of
Yeah,
that relationship with self, just as much as if you enjoy exercising or walking or meditating or anything else that you do physically for your body, like this is one of those things
it is. It's
where
almost
you're,
like a habit, right? It's like,
yeah.
okay, I'm going to go work out my muscles at the gym. Well, I'm going to work out my spiritual muscle as well.
Mm,
And I tell people, like, you don't have to set time aside and be like, okay, from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., I'm going to be spiritual. I'm going to do my spiritual practice. what I invite people to do is interweave spirituality with your everyday. And if that means, oh, it's 11:11, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to pause and pay attention for a moment, that's spiritual. It's allowing ourselves when we're out and about. Oh, look at that beautiful tree. Oh, look, there's a leaf in the shape of a heart. It's allowing ourselves to just connect and be present in that moment. Because I get it. It's hard to be present in every given moment. We got things to do. We got a to-do list. We got things that we're thinking about in the past. But it is a practice and it can be woven into your everyday experience. And as much as I do still encourage to have some sort of meditative, spiritual type of practice where you're consistent with it, know that you can just weave it in. It doesn't need to take a lot of time or energy. It just requires your awareness and mindfulness about it.
Yes. Yeah. Interweaving for the win. Like,
Yeah.
for me, it's just my life, right? It's just part of who I am. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that it goes back to the earlier conversation. When you allow it, right?
Yeah.
When you acknowledge it, when you invite it,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be one more thing to do. It just is what you do. It really just becomes second nature.
Exactly.
There's a phrase you've used a couple of times that I'd love to educate people even more on, and that's about filling your soul bank. I feel like there's something real juicy in there to talk about. So can you tell us what that is and how does one fill their soul bank?
I think for each person, it's going to be a little bit different. Some people might say like a nice warm bath at the end of the day with some candles. Some people might, say that it's, allowing that meditation experience through their day. And I'm strong advocate for meditation, by the way. Some might say it's going into nature, and hugging a tree. So for everyone, it's going to be a little bit different. And so the encouragement or the invitation for our audience is write a list of what you think will fill your soul bank. And so the soul bank is about going back to, okay, connecting with that divine in us, right? God within us, and letting the higher self come in and say, you know what, this would be really good for you. Like, let that be a guide for you. And make yourself your own list because it can be very extensive, but it really does tie to going on that inward journey to the soul, right? So filling the soul bank means that I'm willing to go on that journey to the soul and I'm willing to pick up the golden nuggets along the way, right? To me, it's
Mm.
like a treasure hunt, right? That inward journey is like a treasure hunt. It's like, ooh, I wonder what gifts I'm going to find along the way, and underneath this mud pile over here, oh, look at this treasure over here, and it's such a fun opportunity to kind of go in that discovery. And so for me, filling the soul bank is doing that inward journey and then noticing where those golden nuggets are and picking them up and adding to them, right? Or adding to that soul bank, so to speak. And so, there's some deeper layers, of course, to filling that soul bank. But on the surface, it really is, okay, what would fill me up? What would fill up my cup right now? What would do me some good right now? What would feed me something really healthy right now? Like all of those things, can fill that soul bank.
I love that. It really just is about the relationship with self. My gosh, we want to make it so much more complicated, but
I know, but it's actually just simple. It is.
really is our
Yeah.
we unintentionally make things very, very complicated.
We're so good at it.
I think as a society we have mastered it, dare I say.
Right? Yeah.
But it's really those simple pleasures, right? You hear it all the time, but are you doing it? You know?
Right. Yeah.
Are you doing it?
Are you doing it? Yeah.
And is this how, because you mentioned earlier that you get to experience heaven on earth, that same feeling and experience that you had in that first near death experience. You're
Mhm.
experiencing heaven on earth. Is this how you're doing that? Or like how is that integrate? How are you experiencing that level of euphoria on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of it. And because I'm always thinking about, okay, what am I doing to fill my soul bank today? What's
Mm.
going to really lift me up today? What's going to allow me to feel on purpose or in the most love that I can be today? So that most certainly is part of that process. But, it's also about creating the vision for yourself. What do I imagine my life to be? And like sinking into that vibrational frequency. Oftentimes I'll be sitting on my back deck and I'll be like, oh my God, this is heaven. So I validate my own
Mm.
experience as well. When I get a hug from my son, I say, oh, I received that. I just love it so much. This feels so good. So I'm validating, constantly validating that I'm witnessing joy, that I'm experiencing love, that I'm receiving all the abundance the world has. And so that's a bit of a habit as well to start creating. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Like I speak about how great my life is to my partner and to my kids all the time because I want to embody that and be at that vibrational frequency. And so it allows me to witness things. And part of that is a little bit of that slowing down and interweaving that spirituality to be like looking at the world through that lens of awe and wonder. And like I could go down the rabbit hole around this, but like that lens of awe and wonder, like as though I'm seeing things for the first time, like, oh, I didn't notice the texture in my curtain before here next to me. It's like, oh, I never paid attention to that. Oh, I get to see that for the first time. I get to touch it almost as though I'm touching it for the first time. So I'm invoking that childlike awe and wonder. And that's part of the game for me. But that's just one of the many steps to kind of allowing ourselves. But if you're filling the soul bank, activating that awe and wonder and building that relationship with yourself, I'm telling you, you got a pretty solid formula there, right there.
Oh, that's amazing. And so simple and so accessible, right? You don't need anything.
You don't need anything.
You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah.
You literally have all of it with you at all times.
Heaven is right here, right now, and full access for you if you want it.
Wow. Yeah. Dan, I could just spend space with you all day, every day. And I want to make sure that everyone knows where they can get more of you. And listen, friends, I could not recommend her any more than possible. So listen up and write it down and click on these links. Where can everyone find and connect with you?
Well, I am going to be placing a link in the show notes there that everyone can click on to book in a complimentary Akashic reading. I really love Dr. Edith Eger. She was a survivor of the Holocaust and she's a psychologist. She's got a few books out there and she has a quote and I just love it. She says, love is a 4-letter word spelled Time. In other words, when we give our time, we give our love. And so this is how I share my love with the world. And so you do get access to a complimentary session with me. This is how I've done it for years and years. And people oftentimes they say, you're crazy. You give this away. I get so much. Don't forget, divine is my supply. I invoice God, guys. So, this is easy for me to do. And I love doing these sessions with people. I connect with so many incredible people around the world. And it's been a real blessing and gift for me. And so that's a gift for everyone if they feel called. But you can also check out my website, rosehope.ca. And there you can find my podcast as well as some other goodies for you too.
Amazing. Listen, run, don't walk, book that session. I'm telling you, my first reading was one of the most profound experiences that I've ever had in my entire existence.
Yay! I'm so glad. Oh, that just filled my heart so much. Thank you for sharing that, Laura.
Absolutely. 1,000 out of 10 recommend. So it's going to be in the show notes.
Giving me goosebumps. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a joy.
Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing. You are pure love and light and exactly what this world needs. So thank you for being you.
Oh, sending you my love. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Do you love Rose Hope just as much as I do? Because this woman is phenomenal. Like I said, I have hired her multiple times. My family has hired her multiple times because she's just so spot on. So if you want to get into her world further and you want to feel the magic of her abilities, book your free session to get your Akashic records read. Because I'm telling you, your mind is going to be blown in the best of ways. And let's spread the love. If you have a friend or a coworker that you know could benefit from this episode as well, I ask you to forward it to them. This info could be just as life-changing for them as it was for you. If we're not already yet connected, come find me on social. I am at that LauraAura on all the platforms. And until I see you next time, stay gutsy.